Greetings, brothers. This is Waymon Brown, creator of the EsquireProject.com, the self-enterprising site helping black men to eliminate barriers to personal achievement. Be sure to check out the links within the description. As always, I appreciate your support. I'll be sure to leave the Cash App if you feel inclined to donate. And thank you in advance. It's always good to be back with you again for another video. If you've been following me for any length of time, then you know that I usually take a niche specific approach to the content that I do, and sometimes even perhaps a niche within a niche, where I usually like to focus on a certain situation, a certain segment, or a specific issue that black men have to deal with. For this video, I wanted to specifically focus on the younger brothers out there. And I wanted to focus on the guys who are roughly 25 and under, who more than likely are just getting out of high school, or who are out of high school now. Perhaps they might be in college or some sort of trade school, or they might just be in the full-time employment field now. But I wanted to take some time out to address you specifically, because I think that roughly 18 to about 24 or 25-year-old time frame in life, it can be a turning point in so many different directions for men who are within that demographic. And I know for myself that I was no exception to that either. So I just want to share some thoughts with you, some things that I think could be of an encouragement to you, some things that you might find beneficial as you mature as a young man, as a man for that matter, but as a young man evolving through your processes of life. So as usual, I'm going to invite you to just sit back with me and allow me to share a few things. I remember in the early part of 2008, I was about 23 years old, and I remember this night specifically because I was at home and it was just blistering cold out. Everybody knows I talk about my city a lot because I love it. It's not cold here all the time, but this was one of those winter nights. And the weather, especially the cold weather, has a big influence on our overall culture and temperament here too. But I remember that I was hungry, and I only had a few bucks to my name, and I wanted to go to the corner store to go buy some snacks, as I kind of figured eating some sweets at night would be a little bit of a comfort food for me, and it would help take my mind off a few things because I was under a lot of pressure at that time. But I remember thinking that I couldn't even actually do that, which was spend even a few dollars at that time, because I had to stretch out my money because I needed to make sure I had bus fare for the upcoming week to get to some open interviews. See, like a lot of people in America, I was awaiting a modest tax return and thinking of having a deposit of just a few $100s in my bank account in the upcoming weeks. It was enough to hold me over mentally. So I tried to lay back down. I put the comfort over my head and just tried to capture the vision of getting back on my feet, because this was one of the early occasions of me being flat broke, and I've had a few of them throughout my life. But I was restless, and something in my spirit just didn't sit right with me. So I opened up my bedroom door and I sat on my worn out couch that I had back then, and I just kind of peeled back the curtains, and I remember looking out onto the empty, quiet street. And it was snowing outside, and my eyes just kept following the snow flurries that were falling from the sky. And I was just daydreaming and looking at all these abandoned houses on the block that I lived on at that time. And I remember I said something specifically to myself. And it was a very genuine question that I asked myself. I said, Waymon, I wonder how many other people are like you on a night like this. feeling like a complete loser with no purpose. You see, I thought back to some of my classmates, and in particular the ones that I knew who were like the honor roll students and they kept really good grades. And I figured, we've been out of high school for a while by now. They probably went off to a big university somewhere, probably got landed in a nice career, might have a wife, or even some of the females I thought, they probably have a husband by now, but people have family situations. At the very least, I was sure that they probably had a car because I didn't at the time. Now, have you ever got that same feeling that something's missing in your life when you kind of look around at everything and everyone that's around you, but then when you look deeply into your eyes in your own mirror rather, you know that you should be doing a lot better than what you are. I mean, a lot better. You know that you're smarter than what you've been demonstrating. You know that you're more capable of wherever you are. But for some reason, you just kind of feel like you're stuck and you're at this crossroads that a lot of young brothers find themselves at, especially as they enter their early up until their mid-20s. You start really feeling behind in life somehow. Well, there's a few things I wanted to talk to you about because I think this is a pivotal point where your self-image can really be dramatically influenced for the worse if you don't get on top of it right now. Because as you start to go later and later in life, you get to be, your 30s, your mid-30s and beyond. The older you get, the more difficult it becomes to recover from internal self-esteem issues, not because you have less of capability to do so, because in many ways you actually have more tools at your disposal because you might be more open to ideas and change. But the more you go along, the more you get set in your ways. And eventually you can just become very lazy and very indifferent about trying to make any improvement in life. So let me talk to you about a couple things that I definitely would want to encourage you if you are a young man and you're going through your time in life right now where you're trying to, stand on your own two, where you want to make sure you're established as you're on the come up. Just a few points to keep in mind. And these are things that I also wish I would have told myself as well. As usual, when I share things with you, it's in many ways a journal to my own self based on the journey that I've had. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is I just want to encourage you to actually enjoy your youth. I want you to really think about that. A young black man being told to enjoy his youth. That's not something that's very common that younger brothers get a chance to hear. But see, your youth is a blessing. Your youth is just a few short chapters out of your life. It's just a small fraction of the entire composition of your life's book. And the reason that it's so uncommon to hear to enjoy your youth is because when you're growing up and you're a young black boy before you're an adult, a lot of times we're faced with the realities of the seriousness of life at a very early age. And we often envision ourselves as needing to assume the roles of adults even before we hit puberty. For a lot of us, by the time we're 8, 9, 10 years old, we start thinking about rescuing the family financially or, being a man of the house, things like that, along with a host of other responsibilities that we see for ourselves very early on. We even have an awareness of our treatment in society as young black boys. The fact that we're less than second-class citizens in the eyes of society at large, just because of the color of our skin. And that's irrespective of the social class that you may have grown up in, whether you were, poverty or working class, middle class, etc. You see, a lot of us, we didn't grow up with the cushion of being able to try our hand at something. And then if it doesn't work, we can try something else and we can keep on going until we find a lane that suits us. Young black boys don't get a chance to really make a lot of mistakes because we usually don't have the financial backing from our parents to be able to make those mistakes with our ideas. And we also knew that by the time we turned 18, basically it was time to have it together so that we don't have to rely on our parents for a thing. So early on, we kind of develop a callous about many areas of life because we get exposed to so much early in life. And this is before we even have a chance to really discover what life is about. We have this pressure on us that we have to get it right the first time, or that we'll possibly never have an opportunity for a long time, if ever at all, to try to get it right again. But you see, your youth is a time of self-discovery. And your youth is going to precede your later years of self-reflection, of correcting course, and becoming a self-actualized, well-rounded man. My younger brothers, please, I admonish you very strongly to enjoy your youth and to realize that manhood has stages to it. And there's also stages of development. You see, it's just like in sports. When you get drafted as a football player, for example, you're a rookie. And maybe you got drafted in the later rounds and you might just make the team and you're on the practice squad. So indeed, you're a professional athlete. But there's a big difference in just being on the team and then being a starting veteran on the team that can be counted on during clutch moments. Be grateful that you made the team and make sure you go to practice. And recognize that a lot of the things that you'll be doing as you evolve further in life is indeed practice, because you're trying to get better. You're trying to learn. And be okay with learning as you go, and take note of seeing yourself grow. If there's one thing with me that I wish I would have done a lot differently as a younger man, I really actually wish that I wouldn't have taken everything about life so seriously so early on. Because I put so much pressure on myself to think that life is either about having it all together or just being a complete failure. Now, that doesn't mean that youth is a time of being irresponsible or being haphazard with how you live or treating people poorly or not conducting yourself appropriately, but rather that you should give yourself the emotional freedom to come into your own understanding about life and understand that you're in a stage of manhood and that you shouldn't beat yourself up too much about what you don't know. Don't beat yourself up too much about what you don't have. Don't beat yourself up too much about what you haven't done yet, because you're just getting started within your journey. I'd also encourage you to enjoy your life socially, because youth presents you with a great opportunity to establish relationships that can be with you throughout your life. And it also presents you with the opportunity to have a much more balanced view of the opposite sex, because I think it's a good time, if you find the right group of people, to participate in co-ed group settings that don't focus on sex or relationships. With all this so-called red pill content, black pill content, etc., that we oftentimes hear and that you get exposed to, a lot of times I think it clouds the view, because most of the men who are giving you this information are usually much older men. And by the time that we've reached our 30s, 40s, and up, we have a completely different outlook about a lot of things throughout life. And I think that sometimes ingesting too much, so to speak, of this type of information too early on without giving yourself an opportunity to experience certain things in life, you end up hardening yourself a little bit too early about female nature, or what I like to call social conditioning more than actual nature. What that means is have an awareness, understand things that you might be dealing with when you are dealing with females on different levels. Make sure, of course, that you're keeping your dignity and your self-respect front and center at all times. But also keep in mind that just like you're a young man, when you're dealing mostly with young women, you have an opportunity to enjoy the beauty of a young woman's early adulthood, if you deal with the right type of young women and in the right settings and with the right training. such as women who share similar value systems as you. Perhaps if you're in college or you participate in different social things or different civic circles, those are also opportunities to enjoy a woman's company more without, again, having to make it about leading to sex or some sort of sexual activity or leading to romance and getting your feelings all wrapped up. See, this is a beautiful time for you to create memories with ladies where you can actually share in very charming moments, where you remember the warm conversation that you had with that beautiful girl at lunch. You remember her pretty lipstick and her nice hairdo, and how friendly she was. You're going to think back about that, and sometimes as you go throughout life, it'll bring a smile to your face, especially maybe if you run into her years later. And now maybe you were 19 or 20 when you saw her, and you might run into her again maybe when you're 40. Perhaps she's now with a family by now. But it's going to bring a certain type of charm when you remember her as a single woman, and maybe how you two had like a little bit of a chemistry there, or maybe there was just a little moment that you shared. Don't shy away from those moments. Those are the opportunities for you to capture what are often considered the good old days, where you can think back to when life was just a little bit easier, when you had a little bit less tension going on. And if you have the appropriate attitude and outlook on life, then you can craft your own version of the good old days for yourself. You see, your youth is a time when it's a good idea to take a trip out of town with the fellas. Maybe it's 3 or 4 of you, and maybe everybody has to go in on a hotel because you couldn't afford the trip if everybody would have got their own room. You know, everybody crashes. Maybe somebody's on a cot, somebody's on the floor. And you have a nice time. You enjoy yourself. You have a nice weekend. You have a nice week. Go camping. You can go to clubs, whatever you want to do if you want to be in the middle of a city. Enjoy yourself. Rent a car. Everybody chipping on gas, or maybe you use somebody else's car. Everybody puts their money together. Everybody can go in on pizza or whatever it is that you want to eat. Everybody can get some type of nice memory about meeting girls and flirting and hanging out. You see, these are moments that can put a smile on your face, as long as you're being safe with yourself, safe with other people, as long as you're being responsible, as long as you're not being reckless, and you're not impeding upon another person's quality of life. But I'm telling you, my young brothers, I definitely encourage you to allow yourself to have a little bit of breathing room, because youth goes by quick. And you will definitely spend much time being an older person than you will a younger person. So be joyful that you're now a man, but also be grateful that you're still a young man. And that being a young man is a special stage. It's a stage you'll never get back. And it's a stage that I hope that you embrace for the time that you're blessed with it. Another point to keep in mind is to not let older men, in particular older black men, look down upon you because of your youth. Now, to me, one of the best things for a young man is to have a mentor, a counselor, a guide, some sort of a trusted male source that can help you along the way, who is not your dad. Now, what I mean by that is, even if you have a great relationship with your father, he can serve his purpose as your dad. But I also think it's good to have someone else who might be more of a, like an older peer, so to speak, right? Sometimes this might even be a cousin who you know of, who might be successful, who lives out of town. Sometimes it might be somebody who's not even related to you, but someone who didn't have a role in overseeing you, because that relationship is always going to present itself with a certain dynamic that people who are not related to her, people who are a little bit more distant related to you, won't present. They're going to give you a completely different perspective on life and assistance and giving you advice with things. So if there is a guy, let's say a man who may be 10 or 15, 20 years older than you, somewhere around there, And he has his stuff together, he has his mind together, he's somebody who you look at as having some sort of admirable traits, it might not be a bad idea to try to get to know that gentleman a lot more, because he might be somebody who can actually help you succeed, and what he'll have to offer you can be a lot more valuable than a chest of gold. But what oftentimes happens is, before you even get to the point where you meet someone like that, you encounter older men who want to try to stick it to you for being younger than them. Or they want to try to prove to you how much you don't know and why you should listen to them due to your inexperience in life, or due to your inexperience in a certain field. You see, these type of men are not the ones who have your best interest at heart. These men are the ones who likely have problems within themselves and cannot handle seeing a young man coming into his own at a speed and in a manner that surpasses their progress at your age. These older guys who do this are the ones who are in competition with you, because they often envy your social skills. They often envy how good you are with young ladies. They often envy your talents. They often envy your self-motivation to try to make something of yourself. So oftentimes what they'll try to do is put you in your place by limiting your self-image. And what they do is oftentimes akin to what females do, who don't want you to think too highly of yourself, because she knows that with the more values that you establish and the more you raise your standards, that means that she needs to step her game up to even qualify to participate in life with you. So instead of her making the changes to keep up, she'd rather keep your ego under her thumb. Now, with that said, if you are a respectful young man with a good head on your shoulders, well-intended older gentlemen will see that, and they'll go out of their way to try to help you, because they really want to see you win. If there's one thing I really can't stand, I really don't like to see a young man emotionally torn apart, particularly by a woman, because I've been there several times myself, and I know how volatile it can be. And I also don't like to see a young man who does not have support and might be misdirected and just really needs somebody to kind of take some time with them, maybe a lunch here or a phone conversation there, etc., and just give them some good advice that can actually help them. Not to try to browbeat him with anything, but to actually truly assist him with getting over the hump. Because there's so many younger brothers out there who have so much talent, and they just don't have anybody to help them. But sometimes when you run into some older men who can't stand to know that you're on your way, they'll actually try to subdue your self-esteem. I remember around this same time, actually, when I started this video off, it was around 2007 actually, and I was 23. I had a conversation with a guy who was like 46 at that time. I remember because I think he was just about a year or two younger than my mom and dad, because they're only about a year apart. And I knew this guy from growing up. Didn't really know him that well, never really had a conversation, but he basically saw me grow up in the neighborhood, and our families kind of knew of each other, that type of thing. And I remember one summer afternoon, he wanted to talk to me, and I could tell he had been drinking because I could smell beer on him. And I never really had a conversation with this guy. It was always kind of like a hi and bye, hey, how you doing type of thing, and kept it moving. But alcohol, of course, being a truth serum, he was showing me that despite the fact that he saw my progress within the community as I was growing up, how he really felt about me from afar. And he showed me just how jealous he was of me, because he didn't have the gumption to take certain risks, certain roles, certain responsibilities that I had taken back then, because he was scared to fail. And in his conversation, basically that's what he kept talking about. Oh, I see you doing this and you doing that, but you don't know this and you don't know that, and back in the day, blah, 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 blah. This is the sort of stuff this dude was saying to me. And well, I could have did that, but if I didn't handle it right, what if this would have happened? Basically, he was pretty much saying, I see you out here making moves, and I probably could have did the same thing when I was your age, but because of me being insecure within myself, I didn't pursue it. And now I'm upset with you because you're doing it right in front of me. So he let the real demon out that he had stored up from some period of time because he was trying to minimize the significance of my knowledge and my accomplishments. You see, older men who detest seeing you on a path to success, they'll try to make it appear as though you have it, or they'll try to make it appear as though they have it all together and that you don't have it all together. And that because you're younger, you should just listen to their words and eat it up and follow suit. But a lot of times, these are the same guys who don't have anything together. They just have the craftiness to mask over their weaknesses. But don't fall for it. If older men are trying to keep your self-image at their rule, make sure you check them at the door. Start off with respecting everybody, especially where it's mutual, but don't continue to show respect for people who don't respect you. So have the open-mindedness and the humbleness to gather other men's wisdom and other men's experiences, and you can reference it as a guide for your own decision making. But don't let anybody look down upon you just because you're younger. Another thing I like to share with you brothers is to not be afraid to take risks and to take chances. When I think back to when I was a kid, a lot of times in the summer, I would race other kids on my street, and I'm sure you used to do the same thing. And I was always a taller kid for my age, probably starting around 7 or 8 years old. And I would start off very strong and very swift, a skinny kid, and I had long legs. But the second that I would see the back of another kid's head, I would literally stop in my tracks and just give up on the race right then and there. And my mother, who I love so dearly, she always wanted me to embrace my strengths. And when she would see me do this from time to time, and sometimes it would happen at a family reunion, she would just shake her head because she would tell me in so many words that giving up in those races like that, just because I was losing, was setting the tone for how I would conduct myself in other areas of life. And my mom was right. I remember in 8th grade, I got selected to be a semifinalist for what was known as the Richmond Speaking Contest. And it was a public speaking competition for young people. And my mom, again, she already had put me in some public speaking activities when I was about 7 years old. So by now I was about 13. So I actually had a leg up on the competition because most kids had no public speaking experience besides what they learned in school. And most schools didn't really focus on that. But I remember I was all geared up. I had everything memorized. I was going to recite this poem. But just moments before my time to go on stage, I told one of the teachers who was conducting the whole thing that I was dropping out the contest. Now, he thought I was joking, but I assured him that I wasn't joking. And my mother, she came out to see me in her pretty dress, so eager to see her oldest son compete in the contest. But I looked my mother right in the eye and I said, "Ma, I'm not doing it." My mother started to cry. I very rarely saw my mother cry except for when we had a death in the family. But no amount of convincing by her was going to steer me otherwise. And even though it was breaking my heart to see this happen, I just couldn't move myself to participate in the contest. And one of my friends back then, he saw what was going on. And he said, "Man, you made your mom cry." As the announcement came over the loudspeaker that I was not going to be coming to the stage to recite my poem. Now, though I haven't really reflected too much on that day anymore, and even talking about it right now, some 20 plus years later, it disturbs me when I think back on it. Because there was an opportunity for me to make a name for myself early on in public speaking on a citywide level. I was confident that I was the best school, or best person rather, at my school, because there was only a few of us, and one of us who won that competition would then go on to represent our school at the finals, where other kids would be participating and competing at a district level. But for some reason, I just dropped the ball and I just didn't compete. You see, I quit before I had a chance to even get an outcome. And that type of giving up right before the good part was the start of a trail of events that would influence my conduct throughout life, where I would find myself throwing in a towel if I thought that there was a chance that I wasn't going to make it, or if there was a chance that I wasn't going to make the sort of progress that I wanted to make. And it wouldn't actually be well into my mid to later 20s where I would actually begin to shake off that habit. My younger brothers, I'm telling you, your youth is a time for you to take chances. It's a time for you to allow yourself to see how far you can go and play into your strengths. There's so many people and so many resources around you that are available to assist you along your way, that'll help you step into your greatness, simply if you allow yourself to. Don't be afraid to fall and don't be afraid to fail. Don't worry about the embarrassment. Don't worry about the fact that you may not know everything. Focus on the outcome of the result of putting your best foot forward and the fact that you took action. Because that's really where the magic happens. Each time you make a plan and you make a move towards that plan, you start a chain of events that lead to your throne. The place where you can finally start to put all the pieces to the puzzle together to make yourself into a success. Success may not always happen in the way that you envisioned it originally, but it can always end up as a surprise destination awaiting you when you take action and when you commit to always being willing to try until something good happens. If you have this same bad habit that I cultivated in my youth of stopping while you're ahead in a journey of being awarded with life's offerings, I sincerely beg of you, please don't do that to yourself. Don't be like me in that area. Look at my failures as a lesson to not miss your moments. Whatever you're thinking of doing in this short span of life that you have, go ahead and do it. Look at it, look into it, research it, pursue it. And just by changing the language of saying that you don't want to recover from a loss, and instead changing that to I make corrections based on outcomes. Instead of recovering from a loss, you make corrections based on outcomes. A simple thing like that changes the narrative about how you go about doing things and ultimately the results that you achieve in life. My younger brothers, I will have a part 2 for you, I assure you. This is part 1 of Help for Young Black Men. And as always, it's peace and love, and I'll see you next time.